All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. All right, so let's see here. Looks like we got some questions in there already. Good to see. All right, so we'll start here with Dan's. So Dan says, on the downswing, keeping maximum lag till about your right leg, do you then flick your wrist to release the lag for speed at impact? So let's break apart kind of what you're asking there. So the max lag position is not at your lead leg or your trail leg. Excuse me. We're not holding lag to here. When we look at the better players, typically what you're seeing is they're actually starting to release the club from the lead arm parallel position in the downswing. So basically, what you're going to see in pros in better players is what you're going to see is from the top of the swing to this lead arm parallel position. You're going to see this angle between the lead arm and the shaft. You're going to see that angle get smaller or stay the same. You're not typically going to see it get bigger. There are some instances where you may see it get a little bit bigger. That would maybe be, sometimes like Steve Stricker hitting a wedge. Sometimes you'll see that angle get a little bit bigger, but generally speaking, that angle is going to be getting smaller. So let's break it down in this way. What is lag? What does that actually mean? So what lag means is basically the club being behind your hands. I think a lot of instructors, talk about lag, and they say you shouldn't try to get lag. But the reality is that if you're not getting the club to lag the proper way, you're going to need to do something different to make it happen. So what lag is the club head trailing behind the hands. So this would be the club head in front of my hands, club head behind my hands, right? And then that'd be the club head in front of the hands, right? So as we're bringing this club back, we're getting it more and more and more behind my hands. So I'm lagging this club. I'm loading this club to get it behind my hands, and then it continues to get more behind my hands as I come down, or it kind of stays the same, right? And then from this point in the downswing, this is when this lag actually starts to kind of catch up. Now the club is still lagging; it's still behind my hands. It's going to be lagging all the way till it gets to the release position, which we want to be out in front. But it's going to be catching up typically from this point. Or with some players, it's a little bit later. Like if you look at Sergio Garcia, Ben Hogan, those are just a couple examples of players that have that angle. The sharpest angle actually gets to be they're continuing to lag the club even after that lead arm parallel position. Just a little bit after is typically what you're going to see from those players. But generally, what you're going to see, it's interesting to see. I mean, you can watch it. I mean, just go to YouTube and type in your favorite tour player, and what you'll see is that angle will get sharpest, or it will be at its sharpest point at lead arm parallel in the downswing. Almost every single one. Most of them will be a little bit later. Most tour players are going to be in that category. So that's when it's happening. It's not sharpest down here. So that's why I wanted to talk about that, because one thing that we want to make sure that we do is we have the correct blueprint of what's happening. So that's why I wanted to go over that, because I want you to have the correct blueprint of, the mental, blueprint of what's actually happening there. So the lead arm parallel position in the downswing, that's typically when the club is going to start releasing and start catching up. Now, is that something that you need to consciously do to start releasing that? Typically, it isn't. Typically, you turning through and applying a force to this club is going to be enough to get that club to release. The only way I would say that you need to consciously actually flick the club and actually do the wrist angles to flick it is if naturally you're kind of holding it off, right? So if you're coming into impact and you kind of look like this, right, and you're not releasing the club, that would be a situation where I would say, yeah, you need to actually feel like you're releasing the club hard. But I would say that 99.9% of golfers are not in that category. So odds are you probably don't need to think in that way. But what I would say is that if you are someone who's holding it off, then you may need to feel like you're actually releasing it, right? Releasing it earlier, trying to release it harder. You may need to feel like you're coming in back like this, even though that's not the reality of what you're doing or what you want to do technically, but you may need to feel that to get what you want. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, so we want to create some lag. We want to load the club, continue to lag the club all the way to that lead arm parallel position. And then we're going to release it from there, but it's typically not a conscious thing. Usually people have a hard enough time just getting it to lag from there. Now, let's say that you're someone who is not, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this that are thinking, well, I'm not, creating lag to that position. I'm not getting the club to continue to lag to that position. In fact, from the top of the swing, because this is typically what I see, from the top of the swing. Oops, sorry, my dog's barking. Just hold on a second. I think someone's at the door. All right, sorry about that. Live TV, so sometimes, hopefully, she won't keep barking. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people sitting there thinking, well, heck, I'm not getting the club to kind of load and lag behind and then releasing it from there. If you're not doing that, it typically comes down to two things. There could be some other factors that are leading to this, but what I find that most people are doing is they're reacting to the openness or closedness of the face, the direction the face is pointing, and they're reacting to the pitch of the shaft. And they're doing things in their downswing in order to help them to get the club in the face into a position. And oftentimes that involves on basically getting the club to not lag as much in the downswing. So, for example, what we want to understand is that releasing the club early or releasing the club is a means to close the club face, right? So if I'm coming in, imagine like you're looking up from the golf ball, right? And I'm coming down, I'm swinging down, and this face is open, right, as I'm coming down. And then I keep rotating through the ball. I keep the club lagging behind. Well, look, the club face is just going to stay wide open. Well, if the club face is open and then I stall my body and release the club, well, now look at that club face. The club face squares up, right? So if you're coming down and this face is open coming down, then what you're typically going to do is you're going to release the club early, right? You're going to lose your lag early. You're going to throw this club out from the very beginning to get that club face square. So that's typically something that happens. The other thing that can happen is you're reacting to the pitch of the shaft, right? So if I'm coming down and I have this club steep, right? Well, if I continue to rotate my body, get my hands in front, well, I'm just going to continue to kind of come down steep. I'm going to hit big pulls, slices, pull hooks, things like that, if I'm even able to make good contact. So what a lot of people will do is they'll get in this position, and then they'll stand up. Well, now look at the shaft. The shaft is now from the inside, and now I can hit a functional golf shot. The problem with that is I've had to stand up and pull my chest away from the golf ball. Now I have to release the club early, lose my lag to get to the golf ball. Because if I kept my shaftling, well, my club's going to be a foot above the ball. Intuitively, you're not going to do that. So if you're someone who's struggling to create lag, retain that lag, odds are your face is open or you're not shallowing out the club. I'd recommend checking out our 20-minute shallowing fix to improve that. So to get to that course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix. Or I would highly recommend working with one of our instructors one-on-one, doing swing reviews or something like that to pick out specifically what you're doing. All right, so we'll keep going here. Good question, Dan. We definitely got to hit on some good points there. So Joe F says, when going through week 1 of the distance fix, as you practice each piece, foot, hips, shoulders, arms, do you just exaggerate that body piece or do you add on to previous? Looks like Clay wasn't showing spikes down fairway during hips or shoulders, for example. So they're each their own individual thing. Now, if one thing, so basically what you want to do is be able to do what Clay's talking about in the video, if you can do another thing and what Clay's talking about in the video. So if you're capable of doing something from the previous video in the next video, then go ahead and do it. It's just going to help you to get more speed. If that is something that's helping you get more speed. But if it isn't, just focus on what Clay's talking about in the video. It's very difficult to think about and do multiple things at the same time very well. Typically, you're just not going to do either one of them very well. So I would look at them as individual things. And then as you go through them, what you'll find is that, okay, well, this one helped me quite a bit. This one didn't help me very much. This one helped me okay. Well, there's kind of your hierarchy of things that you should put extra time into. So let's say you worked on the catapult drill. That got you 7 miles per hour. Then you work on the step drill, and it gets you 2 miles per hour. Then you work on the lag drill, and it gets you 5 miles per hour. Well, there's your hierarchy. You know, you should work more on, you know, when you go through the 20-minute distance fix, you know, afterwards, you should put some time into getting that big turn because it obviously helps you to get more speed. If you make that second nature, you're going to get more of a return on investment for the big turn, right? And then from there, once you can make that second nature, right, and you're consistently at that number, right, then you can move on to maybe the lag piece because that was the second biggest piece, right? And now just kind of work on the most relevant piece once you've gone through it. Basically, the 20-minute distance fix, when you first go through it, essentially you're just kind of seeing what helps you the most, right? Now, generally, the way that we have it set up, we have the things in there that usually give people the most. It's kind of in order, typically, of the things that typically give people the most gains. It's not always the same for everybody. So, you know, if you're someone who already has a huge turn, but you don't use the ground and you cast the club, well, the catapult drill may not do much for you because if you're already getting a huge turn, you're not going to get much more of a turn. And, you know, the step drill may be huge for you, and maybe the lag drill may be huge for you. So it's not the same for everybody, but I would work through each one individually. And if you have if something to you comes second nature, like, so let's say that getting a big turn and getting the heel off the ground, that's second nature. You don't have to think about much. It's pretty natural for you to do. And then you go on to the step drill, you can do the same thing and get the benefits of the step drill. That would be ideal. It's just a difficult thing for most people to do. So if you can do it, great. If not, then I would separate each piece. So Peter M says, hi, Q, do you still recommend the V1 Golf app, or is there something new? I find the V1 app very basic and clunky to use. I haven't used the V1 app for a while. We actually started using a different app called OnForm. We were having difficulty with V1 Golf with it, the server going down quite a bit. Like basically their server would go down and nobody would be able to send videos. We used to use that for coaching. I think that the app still works fine, but it was an issue for us with it constantly going down. Like once a month, it would be down for like an entire day. And it just makes things, it was just a big headache for us. So we went out and we kind of looked for some other apps. And we settled on this app called OnForm. And I've been using OnForm for probably, I don't know, 7-8 months, I would guess. And the server's never gone down once. So I'm guessing V1 server has gone down probably 8 or 9 times in that span. So I recommend it. I like OnForm. I believe you do get a certain amount that you don't have to pay for, but after a certain point, I think there is a paid part of it. So that is the nice thing about V1 is that it is free. You do not have to pay for it. Now they do have a subscription that gives you some extra things in the app, but you can use it for free and it has ads on it. Whereas the OnForm app, there's no ads as of now. Anyway, I don't know if they're looking to do that in the future, but as of now, there are no ads. I would maybe be a little bit surprised if they start doing ads because I'm guessing they don't want to do ads. But if you work with an instructor in, through the swinger views, then you get access to the app. You get everything for free. But the app, I believe, you can record a few videos on there, but I think there's a certain point where they say, after a certain amount of videos, you have to pay for it. So if you just shoot the video and then delete them very frequently, then you may be able to use it for free. But if you want to have a history of the swings that you've recorded and things like that, then you'll have to pay for it. Now I don't know how much it costs or anything like that, but I would look into it. I love OnForm. I think OnForm is an awesome app. I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's the best one out there. I haven't used a ton of them. I like it more. I think it's more intuitive than V1. If you use an Android phone, there may be better options out there, because it's very basic on Android. There might be some better apps that you can use on Android, but for iPhone or iPad, I don't think there's anything better out there, in my opinion, than OnForm. So I highly recommend it. One thing that it does have, if you have an iPhone that's been made in the last 3 or 4 years that has this certain like AI chip in it or whatever, it actually has an auto swing feature. So you don't even have to, it just automatically detects and records your swing. So you set it up, as long as you're in the green box, like the box turns green, you take a swing, it will automatically record and trim your video. And it's awesome. The controls to play back the video and the editing or the analyzing tools and things like that are really good. I like it a lot. So I recommend the OnForm app. You can, if you go to their website, it's called getonform.com. It's been awesome. So, but if you do swing reviews, it is free. So that's a benefit. I can't remember what the cost is to use OnForm. If you're using on your own, I should look into that to see how much it is. But if you use it with a coach, one of our coaches, you don't have to pay for it. You get the unlimited and everything. It's just a part of it's all rolled into the fee for the swing reviews. So anyway, if anybody has any questions about the swing reviews or anything like that, don't hesitate to ask. So Peter M says, hi Q, another question. Does the shadowing fix change anything in the lag module, especially the wrist movement stuff? Change anything in the lag module? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, but essentially, as I stated earlier, a lot of times we get rid of our lag because the face is open or the club is steep, right? So if you're shallowing out the club and you got the face, and the face isn't open as you're coming down, then odds are you're going to find it much easier to get lag. In fact, a lot of people, just by virtue of shallowing out the club and getting the face more square, get lag without even thinking about it, because they have to, right? They're incentivized to get it, right? So I don't know that it changes. It doesn't really change any of the drills in there, but it does. It makes it a heck of a lot easier. I'll say that. So for that question, I think let's understand exactly where lag comes from and how we don't want to create lag. I actually just made a video about this and will be released to the members sometimes in the future, because I think this is really important to understand. So again, what is lag? Lag is just the club head being behind the hands. That's my definition of it. I think that's why there's a lot of confusion about it in the golf instruction industry, because there's really no definition to what lag is in the golf swing. My opinion of it is just the club being behind the hands. That's lagging the club, right? That's what makes the most sense to me. So the club head being behind the hands, lagging behind the hands, essentially. So to get lag in the swing, it comes from essentially 3 things. One, it comes from what's called radial deviation in your wrist. So this is a wrist movement where essentially I'm trying to point my thumb. So if I keep my arm still and I try to point my thumb back toward me, that's what's called radial deviation. So it's basically just making my thumb get closer to my forearm, right? So that's radial deviation. The opposite of that would be ulnar deviation, where I'm trying to move my thumb away from my forearm here. So that's one thing. You can call this wrist hinging the club up. That creates lag, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece is shallowing out the club. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but shallowing out the club gives the appearance of lag. So if I take this club and I have it straight up and down, so this would be considered steep, right? So if I am coming down, I have this club steep, and I have a neutral wrist position, and then I try to go into hinge as much as I can. So I'm going into radial deviation as much as I can. This is as much as the club's going to lag, right? So neutral wrist position, straight up and down. You can see that's not a crazy amount of lag there, right? If you look at tour players and they're like this, right? We've seen much bigger angles of lag. What creates that appearance of a lot of lag, one thing that does is shallowing out the club. So if I take this club and I essentially thumbs up as much as I can, and then I go like this and I shallow it. So let me do that. I'll go here and I shallow it. Now, look, I have a bigger angle of lag here because I've shallowed it. All I've done is done this. So it's kind of like an optical illusion of what's going on. But again, that's not a huge angle of lag, right? That's definitely some lag. That's good, right? But that's not a huge angle. How do those players get the huge angles of lag? Well, part of it is getting the change of direction and momentum of the club. When I'm bringing this club back and I'm continuing to lag it, and then I change directions with my hands, this club head has momentum that makes this club lag more. So if I add those things together, I maximize the amount of radial deviation. Some people are more flexible with their radial deviation. I believe the average person can go thumbs up from a neutral position. So that'd be neutral. That'd be thumbs up, about 20 degrees. You can see that's not a lot. I'm probably about average in the amount that I can go into hinging or radial deviation, right? I'm probably about average in that regard. There are some people that can from a neutral wrist position can get the thumb closer to their forearm. And those people will have the ability to get a little bit more lag than someone who, some people can't do this very much at all. Like some people, this is as much as they can go. Those people will have a hard time getting a really sharp angle. Like they just won't be able to because they don't have the flexibility in their wrist. Now, I don't know if that's something that you can stretch or whatever and make happen. It could be just anatomically the way that you're put together that makes it that difficult to happen, but that is something that creates lag. So if I put that together, then I maximize my thumbs up and I shallow out the club. So I get the club shallow, and then I add that change of direction, that momentum switch. Now look at the amount of lag that I can create, right? So that's where a lot of that sharp angle of lag comes from. The way that we do not want to create lag is by cupping the wrist. This is what's called wrist extension. We do not want to cup the wrist to create lag. So it can lag the club more, but that's not the way that we want to do it, because if we do that, that's just going to make you throw away your lag quickly, right? You're going to release the club early because it opens up the club face. If I have the club like this, right? So let's say I'm holding it like this. If I cup my wrist, look at the club face. It's wide open, right? So if the face is open, we will tend to get rid of our lag sooner if that happens. Why is it doing that? Sorry about that. It's the internet is like running slow for some reason. Apologize for that. Let me try to close some things here, see if that helps. All right, so hopefully that helped. All right, so again, if I cup my wrist, I can actually make this angle smaller. I can have more thumbs up. I can get my thumb closer to my forearm if I cup my wrist. On the opposite end of that, if I bow my wrist, so if I have wrist flexion, it will be much more difficult for me to get that thumb closer to my forearm. That's why when you look at Dustin Johnson, he doesn't have a crazy sharp angle of lag as he's coming down, right? He looks like this at this point in the swing because he has a lot of wrist flexion. It's very difficult to get your thumb closer to your forearm if you have wrist flexion. If we're extending the wrist, we can get more. But the problem is that opens up the face. So if I come down and I extend my wrist, I cup my wrist, right? I can create a sharp angle lag. But the problem is that this face is very open. And now I'm going to have to get rid of my lag early. I'm basically going to have to come in and go like that to try to square it up. So we want to make sure that we're not getting lag by virtue of cupping the wrist. We can create more lag by doing that. We can get a sharper angle here. I can get this club to lag very much in the beginning more, but the problem is that opens the face, and now I have to get rid of it a lot faster. It's very, very difficult to be consistent if you have that kind of wrist angle. Now, if you have a very strong grip, right? So if I have a very strong grip, you know, Brennan Steele would be an example of this. He has a very strong grip. He's like this, right? So his thumb is basically on the side of the grip. He's like this. If you have a grip like that, you can support having a wrist angle like this. This is what Brendan Steele looks like at the top, right? You can support that. But if you have a neutral, that's really uncomfortable for most people to have that strong of a grip. Most people are going to be more comfortable in a neutral to strong position. In that situation, we need to have more of a flatter wrist as we're coming down, because otherwise the face gets very open and it's very difficult to control the club face when you're doing that, and you're going to tend to early release if that is the case. So, long answer to your question. Do you need to change anything in the lag module? No, but the lag module is probably going to be easier for you if you're getting the club to shallow and if you're getting the face more closed, because you're going to be less. You're going to be putting yourself in a position to be able to keep your lag longer. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, so Dan S says, been trying to hold off, then whip for speed, similar to Clay's video where he has the driver by the head and pulls it off the golf bag, then whips it through. Feel flicking with wrist can cause instability. As long as the club face is staying square. So if you're trying to create that angle by cupping the wrist, that opens up the club face. If I have that face square and I release hard with my wrist, it's gonna help me create more speed, right? And you're going to be using the ground and the rotation of your body and everything to help do that. Shallowing out the club, all that stuff. So if the face is open, yeah, there's definitely going to be some instability there. It's going to be difficult to time and things like that. Peter M says, hi again. Just to clarify on the V1 app question, I am using the paid version. So I can't remember exactly what the paid version gets you, but I believe that it takes away the ads, which is nice. Makes it a little bit faster to use. And then I believe it gives you like some extra drawing tools. I can't remember what ones. I remember the free version had the angle and lines, which is really all you really need. It's nice to maybe be able to draw a circle or something like that. But if you can draw lines and connect those lines together to create angles, that's really all you need. That's all I really use, to be honest. Or the free form, like the drawing where it's not necessarily a straight line. It's just drawing arrows and things like that. But yeah, if you can draw straight lines on there and angles, that's really all you really need. And I believe that's included in the free. Also, I believe in the paid, you get maybe some pro models. But I'm just going to be blunt about it. Their library of pro models is pretty bad. It's not very good. They don't have very many good swings. They have some. There's a handful of swings, but they literally have hundreds of swings on there, and most of them are not good angles, or they're not of players that you really even know who they are, and things like that. Now, that doesn't mean that they're bad golf swings. It's just that, they're probably pros or aspiring, very good amateurs or things like that. But, it's tough because those swings are copyrighted like by PGA Tour players, unless it's like I'm not really sure exactly how it works, but I know that there's definitely some issues that you can run into. There's a reason why we don't have a bunch of PGA Tour players in our videos, right? As far as like showing their videos and things like that, it's because we don't really have permission to do that. If you're seeing a lot of videos online that have that, they don't really have permission to do that. They might be getting away with it, essentially. We just don't mess with it, right? We don't want to spend a bunch of time on a video and then have someone email us telling us we have to take it down, because we have had a few videos where we've had to do that in the past. So we just don't mess with it. So I recommend OnForm. That's what I recommend, especially for Apple, for iPhone, iPad. All right. So Joe F says, when doing 5 swings, concentrate feet, 5 swings, concentrate hips, 5 swings, concentrate shoulders, then 5 swings, concentrate arms. Above was original question. Thanks for answer. What was that? Going back to. So I just want to make sure. Yeah. So you just think about one at a time. Yeah. So you're just thinking about the feet for a minute, for 5 swings. See how that goes? You're not, when you go on to the hips, you're not thinking about the feet and the hips. And then when you go on to the shoulders, you're not thinking about the feet, hips, and shoulders. You're just trying to make a connection with what helps you the most. So when you're doing the 5 swings with the feet, just think about the feet. When you're doing the 5 swings with the hips, just think about the hips. When you're doing the 5 swings on the shoulders, just think about the shoulders. Because like I say, basically your focus, you can think of your focus as a piece of pie, right? If you're, putting one piece of pie to this, one piece of pie to that, like you're just putting a little bit, it's like having too many eggs in the basket. Sorry to use so many, sayings or whatever, but that's basically, what you're doing. So if you think about it this way, just as an example, there's a reason why texting and driving is dangerous, right? Because if you're doing both of them, odds are you're not doing both of them well. You're either going to be doing driving well and texting terribly, or driving terribly and texting well, or doing both of them terribly. You're not going to be, if you're driving well and texting well at the same time, it's literally just sheer luck. If a deer ran out in the road and you were texting really well, you would be in trouble because your reaction time would be very short, right? So that's kind of how it works in the golf swing. If you're thinking about your feet and your hips and your shoulders, odds are you're either going to be doing only one of them well, or you're going to be doing all of them terribly. The odds that you're going to be doing all of them really well are pretty much slim to none. It would be sheer luck, or it would be, let's say that you're moving your feet really well and your hips really well and everything's working great. Well, it's probably because if you're thinking about your hips, that makes your feet move well. And if you're thinking about your feet, and that makes your hips move well. It's not because you're focusing on both of them at the same time, if that makes sense. All right, let's keep going. So Peter M says, for clarification, if you have the club closed a bit via the shallowing fix, you may not have roll wrists during downswing to close the face. There's typically going to be some amount of rolling of the arms through contact, no matter how shut you have the face. The less shut it is, the more roll you're going to have, and so on and so forth. The face is open, you're going to have to have a lot of roll flip to get it closed. So yeah, I recommend. So basically, just as a checkpoint, what I like to see. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be in these positions. It just means that generally you're going to be better off if you are. So in the further you are away from impact, the less important it is, right? So, but the farther you are away from impact, typically the easier it is to change. So in the backswing, at club parallel to the ground, typically a good position is to have this club face matching my back line. So my back line would be this. So this would be basically a straight up and down back line. I'm in my posture, right, a little bit. So my back line is going to be a little bit inclined. So basically this means this club face is kind of pointing down a little bit, right? It doesn't mean that you can't have this face open and then be in great positions later on in the swing. It just means that typically, better players, you're going to see the club face is kind of matching the back line. When I get up to the top of the swing, what I like to see is this club face, right? The club face up here, I like to see that a little bit close to my forearm. So if you look at my forearm, right, if you're thinking about like the forearm bone here, so like a line going from my elbow to the middle of my wrist, I like to see the club face a little bit close to that. Or even if you're thinking about the top of the forearm, I like to see the club. Let me get in front of the mirror so it's easier to see the club face. So that would be open, right? That would be open to my forearm. You can see if I cup my wrist, that gets my face open to my forearm. If I flatten my wrist, it gets it. So this would be basically with a neutral grip. That gets the club face a little bit close to my forearm. And then if I bow my wrist, that gets it very close to my forearm. So this would be a very shut face. If you have a weak grip, having a bowed wrist at the top gets the club face. It's very difficult to get your wrist that bowed, but you can see how if I have a weak grip, if I bow my lead wrist, that gets the club face a little bit close to my forearm. Right, so that'd be kind of like right there. When I'm coming down, again, I want to have that club face matching my back line. That makes it a lot easier to come to the ball. Now, a lot of this has to, these are just what we see the best players. Now, typically the best players have some speed. So basically, more shaft lean, the better with those players. If you're a player that doesn't have a ton of speed, if you have a lot of shaft lean, it can be difficult to make that functional because it can make it difficult to hold greens. Because if you don't have a lot of speed, you're not giving the ball enough energy to keep climbing up in the air to get up in the air. So you may just be kind of hitting low bouncers, which will help you to hit the ball farther, but may not be as functional, depending on the kind of golf that you play. So if you play on a golf course where you can run it up onto the green, then heck yeah, shaft lean's good. But if you play on a golf course that's maybe small greens, or the green's elevated, or it's bunkered in a lot of areas, and you need a shot that carries, gets up in the air, carries, and then lands on the green and has just a little bit of rollout afterwards, then you actually may want to have a little bit of an earlier release than a tour player, because you just don't have tour level speed to support that and play functional golf, right? So something to keep in mind with a player like that, I don't mind seeing this club face a little bit open to my back line, because that's going to work with a release pattern. Now, we still want to have some shaft lean because it's just more stable to have a little bit. But someone who's swinging their driver 80 miles an hour, I wouldn't want them to look like this at impact. It's going to be unless they play like link style golf where they can just run everything up. It's going to be difficult to be functional with that kind of, because you're going to hit 8 irons very low, right? Now wedges, it could be good to be in that kind of position, but because there's so much loft there. But if you're trying to hit like your 7 iron onto the green, it may come in very low and be very difficult. If there's a lot of bunkering, or it's elevated, it's a small green, you're relying on trusting a bounce to get you on the green, or because you might hit a soft spot and things like that. So ideally, what you'd want to do, typically you want to carry the ball to it. Now that means you may not hit it quite as far as you would, but you're gonna have a much more functional golf game, and that's the point, right? So so that's kind of what what I look for, but a lot of it depends on the player. And there are players like Adam Scott, for example. Adam Scott, at this point in the golf swing, he basically has this club face a little bit open to his back line. Well, he kind of turns it down as it comes into impact. So he's kind of doing this kind of move as he comes into impact, and he has a slight amount of bow in the lead wrist when he comes in. So he kind of turns that down. Now, I'm sure never talk to Adam Scott about this, but I would venture to guess that he doesn't know that he's doing that. That's probably something that comes natural to him to kind of de-loft it and get the face square. But, it's not something that I would really try to teach someone, because it's such the amount of time from here to the golf ball is split second. So it'd be very difficult to train that. It'd be better to train somebody to do something when things are moving slower. It makes it easier to get into those positions. A lot of times, if you can just get somebody to get the face good here, then it's much better throughout the swing. So that's why I'm not opposed. The farther away you are from impact, the less it matters. But at the same time, it's a lot easier to fix. So if we can get the club face better here in the backswing, a lot of times they can get the club face better later in the swing, and into impact when it matters. And it's going to be a lot easier to fix that. It's a lot easier to fix, if you're rolling the face open and then the face is open up here, then it's open right here. It's going to be very difficult for you to just get it where it needs to be right here. It's going to be a lot easier to get it in the backswing. And then more than likely, as long as you don't undo it. Now, if you undo it in the backswing, then there might be, later on in the swing, there may be some extra things that we need to do, but that doesn't happen that often. So Peter M says, free version doesn't have angles anymore. That's why I went to paid, but really tricky to join the lines on the phone and get the angle. Yeah, so the angles, I haven't actually found any program that does the angles. I don't even know what the right way to do the angles is, as far as I don't have an idea that would make it easiest. On Form's angles, basically it just puts an angle for you, and then it has, it's a little bit easier to use, but it's not as fast. The V1 angles are very fast, as long as you just kind of know what you're doing with it. So I would actually probably prefer the V1 way to make the angles, because it's a lot faster. It's literally just making two lines so you use the line tool, and then you just make two of them that join together. It stinks that they're not including that on the free version anymore. But yeah, I believe it used to be. But yeah, we don't use V1 anymore. I don't really recommend it to people. It works. I mean, it works fine. But if I was recommending anything, I would say On Form, especially for iPhone. If you have Android, I don't know what the best. It may still be the best for Android, but it's not as good on Android as it is on iPhone. It's more basic. There might be a better one out there for Android. I'm not sure. V1 might be better on Android. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what you use, but yeah. So Stephen M says, I live in Utah and winter is here. What drills do you recommend I do indoors during the winter to work on shallowing my swing and getting rid of the over top of the cone tendency I have? It depends on what kind of setup you have. I don't know if you're able to. Do you have a net? Do you have a mat? Do you have space to actually swing a club? That sort of thing. Because if you do, you just do the 20-minute shallowing fix like into the net. That's what I would recommend doing. Just work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. If you don't, then all you can really do, if you have space to where you can kind of do movements, what I would do is I just kind of do shadow reps. A wall drill is a good one. So this is something we talk about in the 20-minute shallowing fix, where you set up with your heels. I think it's like a 2 feet or a foot away. And what you can do is go up to the top and then feel that club kind of drag down the wall as you're coming down. You can see how that makes it very shallow. So doing that kind of drill, have a mat, no net. Yeah. So yeah, what I would recommend doing is just do shadow swings. What you can do is foam balls. You can get some foam balls. You can make kind of a makeshift net. Put a chair in front of you, drape a towel, blanket over the chair, foam golf balls, hit them into the towel or whatever. They sell really soft foam golf balls on Amazon, very cheap. You can probably get like a pack of 10 of them for maybe $10, probably cheaper than that. I don't know. I haven't bought them in a while, but yeah, you can get those and actually hit foam balls off of your mat. I would set up an obstacle. Basically, what it comes down to, you need to have feedback in some way to let you know whether you're shallowing it. Now, what's difficult is knowing, whether you have the face closed or not. That's going to be something that's difficult to do. Something that's difficult to do indoors, because if you're hitting into the net, you can't really tell very well where the ball's starting. So yeah, that would be something you kind of need to take to the range, but you can definitely work on shallowing. Set up a feedback mechanism. If I can take, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using a shoe, but just because I have a shoe handy right here, I can put a shoe right here, and then I'll have my ball a little bit behind and to the right of it. So now if I come over the top and steep, I'm going to hit that shoe, right? And a lot of people don't like doing this because they feel like it's in the way. So I put it like this. And then if you feel like this is in the way of your backswing, then I would just start out with it already. So getting your set up with it already behind it, then make swings where you come down and you avoid hitting that and you hit the ball, right? So that's what I'd recommend to try to help you get rid of that. Or if you don't want to do the setup with the foam balls and stuff like that, just put it down and then swing from the inside of it, avoid it, do the wall drill, have the club working down the wall, swing out to the right, that sort of thing. All things to help. Look at yourself on video, make sure that you're doing what you think you are, right? All right, we got about 15 minutes left. If we got any more questions, keep them coming. I have foam balls and video. Thanks. Yeah, so you're halfway there. Set up the chair with the towel on the back or the blanket on the back, and you'll be good to go. You'll be able to hit balls for sure. So Ralph says, "Hi Q, is the release really starting at impact and finishing 45 degrees past impact, as the right wrist is bent at impact and the left wrist is straight?" So the release, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You may have missed it. But basically, the release starts from the lead arm parallel position, right? That's when the release starts. So just kind of go into that again, because I think this is really important information for a lot of people to understand kind of the blueprint of how the club works. So again, the way that I define lag would just be the club being behind the hands. So as I'm bringing this club back, I'm essentially getting the club more and more behind my hands. I'm loading up the club, right? Now, as I come down, what we see with most of the best players, you're actually going to see this angle between my lead arm and the shaft. You're going to see that angle get a little bit smaller as I come down. So the club continues to lag more as I come down. If you want to see the whole explanation as to where lag actually comes from, as far as what creates the lag, go back and check out the archived office hours. I won't re-explain that here. But basically, from this point in the swing to the golf ball is when that angle between the lead arm and the shaft, it actually starts to get bigger, right? So here it's getting smallest. This is where I have my maximum amount of lag. And then from here, it's going to start to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At impact, this club is still lagging, right? It's not increasing the amount of lag, but it's still behind my hands, right? And my trail wrist has some extension in it, right? My lead wrist is typically going to be more on the flat side. A lot of this depends on how strong or weak your grip is. If you have a very weak grip, in order to have the hands ahead of the golf ball, so basically ahead of the club head, to have some lag, to basically have the club head lagging behind your hands a little bit and have a square club face. If you have a weak grip, you basically have to have some bow in this wrist. An example would be Colin Morikawa. Colin Morikawa has a very weak lead hand grip. His thumb is basically right on top of the shaft. If you look at the crease that is created between his thumb and his hand here, see that crease right there? That is pointed toward his chin. That's considered a weak grip, right? So for him to come into contact, to have shaft lean and to have a square face, he has to look like this. And this is what he looks like at impact. There's a lot of wrist bow there, right? If he didn't have that, right, then the face would be wide open. Because if you have the lag, actually opens up the face. So the more the club is lagging behind, the more open the face is. So that's when the club is starting to release from that lead arm parallel position, not at impact is where it's starting to release. It's from here. The release, the way I would, and that may be where there might be some confusion, is just, nomenclature, thinking of, okay, well, how do you define terms? I define the release, or when the club is starting to release, when the lag is starting to catch up. So you're essentially losing some of your lag. You still have lag, but you're starting to lose that lag. When you start to lose the lag, that's when the club's releasing. So here is when I'm maximizing the amount of lag that I have. Everything from this point on is the club head catching up right? So I'm releasing the club. And then from here, I've fully released the club. This is the straight line release position. We want that to be roughly about 45 degrees out in front. And then after that, now the club head goes past my hands as I come around into the full finish, right? So that's really, what's going on there. All right, so let's keep going. So Eduardo H says, I'm working with you on the chair drill for the backswing. Do I start my transfer to the right leg straight or a little bit to the inside? Thank you. Do I start my transfer to the right leg straight or a little bit to the inside? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but basically what we want to do is in the backswing. So what I'm working on with Eduardo is basically he's sliding his hips away. I mean the club. Do I start my transfer to the right leg straight? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just going to answer what I think you're asking, and then if it's not, then just let me know. But basically, just to kind of catch everybody up on what me and Eduardo are talking about. So, Eduardo, correct me if I'm wrong, Eduardo, but I believe he struggles with kind of chunks and thin kind of shots. So, not having good ground interaction. So basically, the low point of his swing arc needs to be more toward the target. So what he does in his swing is he kind of slides his hips this way. So his hips kind of move away from the target. And then that makes it very difficult to get your low point more forward. So ideally what we would want is we would want the hip to maybe just have a slight amount of lateral movement to get pressure into the trail side. And then as we get up to the top, as we get in about halfway up, this is as far to my trail side as I'm going to be. And then as I get up to the top, my hip is actually, if you were to draw a line on the outside of my hip here at address, I would actually start to create a gap between my leg and that line as I get up to the top of the swing. That's typically what I'm going to see. With the driver, you may not create much of a gap there because you're going to be more centered. But for an iron, to get that low point more forward, we want to create a little bit of a gap there as we get up to the top. There's a couple of reasons for that. So one, if I slide my hips this way, then I just have a long way to get my hips to be more toward the target. I just have more ground to cover. It's difficult. And also, if I slide my hips this way, my leg is going to be more straight up and down. So now I don't have leverage to be able to get to my lead side. It's just more difficult. So in twofold, it just makes it very difficult. So what we want to do is have a little pressure transfer, maybe just about an inch of the hip movement, and then that hip's going to move back and around. We're going to create that gap, and now I can continue to push off and get to my lead side much more easily, right? So I'm not sure what your question is, but again, I'm going to go here, a little bit of move into the – so what the chair does, if I have a chair and I put it just outside my hip here, then what I can do, I can start out with it just touching my hip just barely. I can start my backswing, get a little bit of pressure in my hip into that chair. That pressure is going to max out in this area. Then from here to the top, I'm going to create that gap, right? So you can't really see, but there's a gap there, right? And typically it's going to be an inch or two of gap. And then from there, I'm going to keep going to my lead side. So what you can do to kind of break this down is you can start here, just barely touching it. You can go here, halfway back, just barely touching it. Stop hands about parallel, then pause right there. Go to the top, create the gap, start the downswing, pressure into the lead foot, come around into the full finish. And you're going to have a much easier time getting the low point of the swing to be more in front of the golf ball. If you struggle taking divots, if you struggle with thin shots, if you struggle with chunks, this is a great drill for you to do. So, Eduardo, I hope that answered your question. Let me know if there was anything I left out there, but that's definitely what we want to try to do. Got it. Thank you. No problem. All right. So let me know if there's anything I missed there as far as, what you're asking. Stephen M says, I'm interested in what Eduardo is talking about. What is the chair drill for the backswing? Yeah. So chair drill is just, what I demonstrated there. Yep. So again, for everything that I try to get people to do, it's really, really important to have a feedback mechanism. So it's one thing to say, hey, stop sliding your hips, right? But if I tell you to just stop sliding your hips, odds are when you go to try to do that and you feel like you're not doing it, you're not really going to be, you might do it marginally better, but we need to break it down, and we need to use some sort of feedback mechanism, and then do reps where we know we're doing it correctly. Because if we're not using a feedback mechanism like the chair, I like stuff like that because it's instant feedback. There's some things that are more difficult. So that's why for shallowing, I like to have, something in the way to force you to shallow out the club. You know right away if you hit the obstacle in your way that you're not shallowing out the club. You need to regroup. You may think you're shallowing out the club. It may feel like you're doing something different, but the reality, feel isn't always real, right? So you need to have some sort of mechanism to tell you. If you're speed training, you need to use a speed training device like a PRGR or something along those lines to tell you whether your speed's going up. It may feel like you have more speed, but the reality may not be the case. So I recommend using a feedback mechanism like that. So you need to have a feedback mechanism for what you're trying to change in the swing. With that, you're trying to fix your ground contact, right? So what I like to use for that, especially if you're hitting off a mat, one, I like divot boards. Divot boards are awesome. All right, so making sure this is giving you feedback on where you're hitting the ground in relationship to the golf ball. If you're hitting off of mats, and I'm not gonna lie to you, divot boards are expensive. I mean, I think they're over $100. That's a lot of money to spend. I think that's a lot of money. I would definitely think twice about buying one for sure. I think that they're worth it because they're awesome feedback tools, but they're expensive. So that may not be ideal for everybody. What I like is very inexpensive. This is a plastic cutting board, that I took from our kitchen. Don't tell my wife. I took this from the kitchen here, and you just lay this down on your mat, put the ball, not quite a club head in front of the ball, maybe 2/3 of a club head in front of the ball. Now, if I come down and I hit the ground before the golf ball, I'm going to hear that click from that, right? If I come down and I don't hear the click and I hit the ball solid, I know I'm hitting the ground in the right spot. So, hitting off of mats can be troublesome for some people because you can hit the ground behind the golf ball, and the club will just slide on the turf and you'll be none the wiser. But then you get out on the course and you do that exact same swing. Now all of a sudden you're chunking it, right? So you have this feeling, man, I'm hitting it great on the range, and then you realize I'm not really hitting the ball great. I'm just getting this false sense of how I'm doing. So if you struggle with ground contact, in fact, if you're hitting off of mats frequently, I just recommend doing this, either using a divot board or using something like this. The speed trap is also something that I like, especially off of mats. This one, it's a little bit thicker. Like this is a very thin cutting board. This one's a little bit thicker. So basically placing it about a whole club head width in front. That's where I like to put it there. And this one, since it's a little bit thicker, you get a little bit more of a click, right? So if I come in and I hit, I'm going to hear that, right? So that's why I like those. You get an audible click. And then if you hit it thin, you didn't get down to the ground enough. It was too far in front, right? So you're getting some feedback on what you're doing. If you want brand, what is this? Oh, this is Pampered Chef, but I think any brand would work. It's literally just a plastic cutting board. This one's a little bit rubberized on the bottom of it, so it may kind of hold a little bit better, not move around. This one, I'm not sure how it would work in windy conditions. So if it's windy, this may be a little bit too light. I would definitely recommend kind of a heavier kind of plexiglass kind of thing. The little plastic things that they use to fit you for clubs to see your lie angle, those work great. Just something to give you some sort of feedback, but that's definitely something that I use. All right. Let's keep going. So last question here from Dan S says, would a fairway wood be just like the iron on the chair drill? Yeah, if you're hitting it off the ground. Yeah, so if you're hitting a fairway wood off of the ground, you need to make ball first contact. So I think what a lot of people do with the fairway woods is they push the ball position too far forward and they put the ball in a position that would make it very difficult for them to hit down on it. when the ball is on the ground, we need to hit down on it in some amount because the ground's in the way. I can't hit up. Now, if I have a perfect lie where the ball is like, the lie is fluffy, the ball is kind of sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee, you can get away with hitting up on it because the club will kind of get through the grass and you can hit up on it. But if it's, kind of on some firm ground, or, maybe it's kind of a tight lie or something like that, there's just nothing underneath the golf ball. So there's ground underneath the golf ball. So you don't have any space underneath the golf ball to hit up on it. So we need to hit down on it. So typically when people tell me they're struggling with thin and junk shots, don't know if that's the case with you, Dan, but that's the most common thing that I see with the with fairway woods that I see people struggling with. They move the ball position too far forward, then they either chunk it or they miss the ground, hit up on it and hit it thin, or they top it, right? So hit your fairway wood the same way you hit your 7-iron. Put it in the same ball position, hit it the same way, hit down and through the golf ball. You will hit your 3-wood a lot better if you do that. Now, if your 3-wood's not getting up in the air very much when you're doing that, first I'd make sure you're not hooking it, right? So if you're shutting down the face and the ball's going way left, and it's going low because you're getting the face too close, that's one thing. But if you're hitting it straight or even to the right and the ball's just not getting up in the air very much, and you're hitting it solid, hitting down and through it, then you probably need a higher lofted 3-wood, or you probably shouldn't use a 3-wood because you don't have enough speed to support the loft on that club. Now, if you're hitting a 3-wood off of a tee, well, now we can elevate the ball, right? We can elevate the ball, and we can now hit up on it a little bit. Now, the chair drill still applies in the sense that we never want to be sliding our hips away. We never want to be doing that. The difference between, hitting up on the ball and hitting down on the ball, as far as how the hips are moving, if I'm hitting down, if I want to hit down on the ball, what I'm going to do is if my hips touching the chair at address, I'm going to be going up to the top. If I'm hitting down on the ball, I'm going to be creating a little bit of a gap here, and then the gap's going to increase as I come to the golf ball. If I'm hitting up on the ball, there may not be much of a gap here at all. If I go up to the top of the swing, I'm still turning my hips. I'm not sliding my hips, but there may be the gap's going to be a lot smaller or very minimal, right? So here would be the difference: iron swing up to the top and driver swing up to the top. So you can see I'm much more behind the golf ball when I'm here because I'm trying to hit up on it. Right. So that's really the difference. So what I would say, iron swing, I'm typically going to be more narrow, right? I'm going to be here. Driver swing, I'm going to be a little bit wider. I'm going to be more there. All right. So there's very, very minimal gap here. Iron swing, a little bit more of a gap. So Stephen M says, what is the correct position of the ball for the fairway wood or hybrid? Same place you play your 7-iron, straight down from the lead of ears, generally a good ball position. Could be a little bit different with everybody, just depending on release patterns and things like that. But generally speaking, if we have some good spine tilt, you can think of if I'm taking this club from the notch in my collarbone, right in the center there, down to my belt buckle. And then if I tilt until my club hits my leg, that's the amount of tilt that I want. If I go straight down from my lead ear from there, that's going to be a little bit forward to the middle of my stance. That's generally a good ball position for almost any club that you hit off the ground. The exceptions would be a wedge, where maybe you're trying to hit down on it a little bit more, get your hands a little bit more in front. That could be more the middle of the stance or even a little bit back of the middle of the stance. So that's going to help you to hit down on it, get you a little bit more spin, but you also get the low. So low trajectory, high spin. That's pretty ideal for a wedge. Now, if I have the release pattern that can support it, then I may move the ball position slightly more forward for a ball forward for a fairway wood, right? But if you're someone who already early releases it, you don't need to move the ball position forward for that 3-wood because you're just making it really difficult for yourself. So play it in the same way you would like your 7-iron. Straight down from the lead ear is a good ball position for most. The middle of the stance may be a good. You may find moving it from forward to the middle of the stance, you may start hitting the ball a lot better. especially if you're someone who comes down steep. The farther the ball is in the stance, the farther the ball is back in the stance, the much easier it is to swing from the inside. So, if you're someone who really struggles with swinging the club from the inside, you come down steep, you may find that you'll have a much easier time if you move the ball a little bit back in the stance. Now, as you get better with that, you can move it a little bit more forward. We don't really want to smother the ball and hit down on it too much. But if you're someone who comes down steep, that could be a good thing to kind of help you in the immediate future. All right. All right. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday. Wednesday, since we have a clinic this week, will be 3 p.m. We'll be back to normal schedule next week. It'll be 3 p.m. Next week. All right. Or 3 p.m. tomorrow. All right. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Talk to you next time.